Hi, everybody. My name is Ashley Coley. I am one of the directors at OCVT. I am excited to present on a topic that is relevant for me, especially right now, is spiraling. And we're going to talk about why spiraling is so common after a brain injury, and then even go into some techniques and strategies to help us better cope with spiraling. Before we get started, I'd love to just introduce myself. My name is Ashley Coley. I am one of the directors here at OCVT. My co-host is Ali Conrad. She is a brain injury survivor as well, and working through this journey of recovery. But let's jump into the topic of spiraling. Why spiraling is so common after a brain injury is because our brain is responsible for so much, especially things like our thoughts, our stress response, our emotions, and information processing. Why do we spiral? Well, with a brain injury, that frontal lobe is so vulnerable in brain injuries, and that frontal lobe helps with self-regulation, flexible thinking, and the ability to shift perspectives. Damage to the brain can make it harder for us to put things into context. So a small issue feels disproportionately big. And I'll pause real quick to just share how this topic came to top of mind for me. Is, you guys know, I'm a brain injury survivor, was involved in a very bad car accident in my 20s and knocked unconscious for over 20, 30 seconds. And here recently, my family had some car issues, and um, I went into a spiral over an expensive car repair, and made a bigger deal about it. It wasn't until my husband actually was trying to calm me down and said, "Hey, it's just car trouble. Like it's things that we expect. These are, cars are bound to break down and need to have repairs, and you're spiraling. So calm down." And it wasn't until he said exactly that word, those words, "you're spiraling," did I have that perspective. So this topic was near and dear to me because I do spiral. And most recently it was over um, car repairs. But back to the topic, when we have that injury to the brain, that frontal lobe that's responsible for those aspects of that self-regulation, can be hard to not spiral and not to make things feel bigger than they are. The injury can interrupt our emotional regulation. So it can absolutely um, interrupt the connections between the emotional centers in our brain, and the part of the brain that's the brakes that's supposed to be able to help us calm down when things are escalating. That part may be damaged. It might have be part of what was injured, and so it's going to make it even harder. Um, the emotions may intensify more quickly than we would want, and that would be what is our norm, before the injury. And it might feel harder to pull or rein those feelings in. Fatigue and overload. So, we know that cognitive fatigue after a brain injury is real, and it affects everybody a little bit differently, especially through the process. But with fatigue, it lowers our ability to cope. So when we're tired, the brain has fewer resources to buffer that stress, making spiraling more likely. And then we have a heightened stress response. So some people develop this increased sensitivity to stress, and then we go into what we know as fight or flight mode because of these triggers. And oftentimes we know that even after, especially after a brain injury, Is our brain more likely, and our nervous system, I should have said, our nervous system more likely to go into that fight or flight when triggered? So even minor problems like car repairs can trigger a stronger than expected emotional or stress response. Happened to me just recently. Reduced cognitive flexibility. So switching from one thought to another or letting go of a negative thought can be harder. Our brain can tend to get stuck in this loop of racing thoughts and negativity. So, what spiraling looks like is a small inconvenience, like forgetting something, or technology not working the way it's supposed to, or your plans changing, can trigger frustrations because they weren't expected. So, those thoughts escalate. This always happens. I can't handle anything. Everything is ruined. And our anxiety or our anger or both, irritability increases. So physical symptoms may follow, like racing heart, headache, fatigue. It takes much longer for us to calm down and regain perspective than it did before our injury. So some coping strategies include things like awareness and interruption, learning to recognize the first signs of spiraling, like tension, faster breathing, racing thoughts. Use a simple cue like, okay, I noticed this. It's our responsibility to start taking action and responsibility of like, let's try to figure this out. Like, when is this happening? Can I better judge and recognize it earlier on to try to help reduce how big the spiraling episode can be? So pausing, deep breathing, trying to interrupt that loop, racing thoughts, negativity. External support, write things down, use reminders, and build structured routines to reduce unexpected disruptions that can cause these triggers. I've been thinking about writing quite a bit. It keeps coming up in several things that I'm seeing lately, and I haven't written or had a journal in so many years just because of how busy I am. But I caught myself looking at journals recently. So I think I'm going to try to start journaling and writing things down. There's a grounding technique that I'll go through, but it's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. So it's like name 5 things that you see, 4 things that you hear, 3 things that you can feel, 2 things that you can smell, 1 thing that you can taste. What it does is it helps bring us to the now, to the present, to help try to break that loop of those racing thoughts, the negativity. Scheduled rest. Rest can prevent our spirals and help us manage the fatigue because we know how quickly fatigue can onset, and it's different for everybody, especially at different phases of this recovery journey. But rest is so crucial to help us manage our day to day. There's therapy support, cognitive rehab specialists like neuropsychologists, therapists trained in TBI to teach regulation strategies like cognitive behavioral therapy that's been adapted for brain injury or mindfulness training. All of these things I've heard can be extremely helpful. And medication, in some cases, these can be helpful too to manage other aspects of this process. In the moment, some strategies to help us reduce the spiral, how big the episode can last. Name it to tame it. Allie taught us this one. It's one of my favorite um, pearls that I've taken away from some of her presentations is say to yourself out loud if you're able to that you're starting to spiral as soon as you notice it. You can hear it. You're being responsible. And didn't even say this is the brain injury. This is one of the responses. This is not me. This separates the injury from your identity and our identity and kind of takes away some of the shame that we feel. The box breathing technique, a lot of you guys are probably familiar with, but you inhale for 4 seconds. You hold it for 4 seconds. You exhale for 4 seconds. And then you hold for 4 seconds. Box breathing is hard for me. I can't even lie. I try to do this to help calm and to help regulate my nervous system. And I have to tell you, I find it challenging to do each of these steps for 4 seconds, which tells me that I get in that fast breathing. It's something that I've been paying more attention to. Here's that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding that I mentioned. And again, it just forces your brain back into the present moment instead of those runaway thoughts. So you stop and you name 5 things that you can see. You name 4 things that you can touch. You name 3 things that you can hear. You name 2 things that you can smell. You name 1 thing that you can taste. Also, mini reset breaks help. Just stopping what you're doing, getting up and moving around and doing something different, like walking and stretching. And I even saw washing your hand with cold water, which I had never thought about, but it makes sense to me that that cool water could help regulate and reset our nervous system. Again, goal is to bring a pattern interruption to what the brain is doing, that loop. Write and dump. Grab a sticky note, phone app, just jot down your intrusive thoughts. Like, I messed this up. You were late to the event. And then set it aside. I love that physical action of being able to write it down. Reason why I told you guys I think I'm going to start journaling. Write it down, put it to the side. There's a physical feeling of putting it there. But these help us build resilience and lower the chances of us spiraling. Routine and structure, because consistency lowers surprises, which is a big trigger for us. So using calendars and alarms and checklists to make daily life more predictable. Energy management. I love this analogy to think about our brain like a battery. We all are checking them, making sure that we have enough sufficient battery on our cell phones. Are we checking ourselves and being mindful and regulating how we feel and our energy level? There's a 20-20 rule that with every 20 to 30 minutes of effort or activity that you pause. This says 2 to 3 minutes, take longer if we need it. Protect the rest time because that's going to help us be more cognitively prepared. Again, the cognitive behavioral tools. So therapists that can help us work through those thought patterns and reverse the replacement thoughts. Like instead of saying everything is ruined, we can say this is frustrating. It's not ideal, but we can handle it. I wish I would have been saying that to myself when all the car trouble was starting and I was thinking about all the aspects of that. One thing I can handle. Mindfulness and body awareness, gentle practices like guided meditation, yoga, or just even mindful walking that helps retrain our brain to notice the spiraling earlier. And your support people. We shouldn't feel embarrassed to talk about these things with our people and our tribe and those that are around us because this is not a solo journey, this recovery process. It can't be a solo journey. We have to feel empowered to have open, transparent conversations with our people about what we're going through to help them better understand it, but to also help them bring us that calmness. And in this situation that I'm sharing, it was my husband that just recognized that I was spiraling, making a much bigger deal than it was, taking it out of context, and he just said, "You're spiraling." I needed that because I was spiraling. But having those external cues can really prevent it escalating. Then the professional rehab support. So your neuropsychologist, your occupational therapist, TBI trained therapist can give us personalized exercises for self-regulation. They're trained professionals. That's what they do. That's their area. But just a few reminders before we end here. Energy management, routine and structure, they're going to help us. Thank you for joining. And I hope that this topic was relevant, or I hope that it was informative and that you found a takeaway. And I hope that if so, then you're able to implement it into your day to day. Next month in November, we will be celebrating our 3-year anniversary of our brain injury support group, which we are so honored to be able to come together and build this community of support and motivation as we are walking through this recovery process after a brain injury. Allie will be presenting in November, which you guys know her presentations are always amazing. So we hope you can join us then. Have a great October, and we'll see you soon.